coming back from San Francisco with a builder friend of mine, and he took me up to the top of a mountain where Steve and his friends were building in an extremely unusual and I think wonderful house, which has subsequently been finished. And on the same site there was an equally wonderful piece of sculpture by Pat Patterson, which I hope...
no slides of that stuff.
Oh. That's just art. Anyway, the combination of the two things on one site is something to behold. And Steve and his associates operate in a very unorthodox manner these days, that of itinerant builders. And they travel and build buildings in different parts of the country under very wide-ranging circumstances, and have done some very exceptional work, generally outside the realm of accepted and are commonly regarded standards of taste. Not unlike what we saw a couple of weeks ago from Bruce Goff. And so I will let Steve Badanes maybe explain himself a little better than I could. I would just pass on one more thing. I was asked to suggest that there be no smoking tonight. Thank you very much. Steve Badanes.
Okay, how do I hook this guy up?
Snap. That goes in your back pocket, and I can forget about it. New changes.
Okay.
For a while.
Sounds pretty good. I think Fred did a fabulous job of opening remarks, and I don't generally go with real extended ones myself anyway. And I have a lot of visuals, and they pretty much tell the story. So we could start actually right away with the slides. If we can get the lights down, we can. Okay, the name of the group is Jersey Devil. We started about 10 years ago in New Jersey and took our name from a famous New Jersey folklore character shown in an actual unretouched photo there on the right. Now, we still maintain a small office in New Jersey. That's it. But as Fred said, we're pretty itinerant now, doing business out of wherever our commissions take us. We build all of our own projects and generally live on the site in temporary structures. The first buildings we built looked something like this. About 10 years ago, this is what we thought the future of architecture was going to be. Lightweight, portable, air-supported structures. You could be either like almost outside or hermetically sealed in this kind of soft envelope. It was a fabulous fantasy, but it was a fantasy based on cheap energy. Cheap energy, or energy to actually hold the building up, and vast amounts of it to heat and cool the buildings. But inflatables were amazing forms. It's hard to tell whether these buildings are all skin or all structure. But one thing is that the actual technology, the way the building is built and the material that it's made of, determines the form. And if there's one thing that sort of threaded together all the projects we've done, it's that idea. This would be an example. We realized we had to do something serious if we were going to make a living at this business. So we got into residential construction. This is the first house we built in 1972 for a steam fitter in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. He had an 80 by 100 foot lot, no real view, so privacy was the main concern in designing this building. It's a completely internal experience. It spirals upward from east to west with glass at the intersections of the shells so that sunlight is continuously entering the building as the sun moves across the horizon. That big dome window faces due south and gives them some direct gain while allowing for a view over this little suburban neighborhood that it's in. That's the basic idea. Some what of an improvement over a snail shell by giving it light and ventilation. There, the drawings show how the air works. This kind of spherical enclosure is the most efficient volume for enclosing square footage. So we were able to get like a 2,000 square foot house, which you could heat with one centrally located wood stove. These are some pictures of construction. On the left is the foundation for that center tower, and on the right is the lowest level, which is built of concrete blocks, insulated on the outside, and then backfilled. In those days we called it a basement. Nowadays I think we'd call it earth sheltered. These are manholes, precast concrete manholes. They're 4 foot diameter, 4 foot high, 4,000 pounds a piece, and in 1972 they cost $80 each. So with the aid of a rented crane, we were able to build a 32-foot column of these things in less than a day. It was an incredibly cheap, do I got to focus on one of those? I think. It was an incredibly cheap way of getting 32.
How'd you feel about sitting up there in the lights that you
I'll sit up there. I don't know if I can see them though then, Roger. It was an incredibly cheap way of getting 32,000 pounds of thermal mass right in the center of the house, which also supported the building and acted as a mechanical chase. These manholes come with the ladder cast right in it, so the whole inside of that column is accessible. It was also a fairly scary experience. That's what I want there. Up on top of a ladder trying to guide a 4,000 pound manhole into place. But we topped it out in less than a day and got a rainbow at the end. She took as a positive omen. The framing is radial around the column, and the flooring is pine decking, which when sanded becomes the finished floor. This kind of radial frame, when sheathed, acts like a huge washer, which allows for large cantilevers at the edges. The framing itself is prefabricated Gothic barn rafters. In the East Coast and in the Midwest, these are a pretty standard item in the agricultural industry, and they're available in a wide variety of sizes, so we bought like 6 different sizes and connected them right to the column, so you get your roof and your walls in one shot. And then the siding is tongue and groove cedar decking, and when you side up the outside of the building, the inside is done, and the structure is completely exposed, and how the building went together is immediately apparent. The insulation goes on the outside. We tied this guy to the center of the column, and he skidded around and sprayed 4 inches of urethane foam, which makes the building not only weather tight but super insulated. Then to protect the foam from the sun, we trowel on a weather coat of a sort of latex cement stucco, sort of the same color and texture of the beach sand that's on the site. And that's it, it's done. No siding and fussy siding and roofing details. You get this kind of soft, amorphous, almost alien exterior, which is in marked contrast to the soft, warm wood interior, which really hits you by surprise when you go inside. This is called the Helmet House. Strangely enough, we built it for a kind of a Don Quixote type of client in New Hampshire in 1974. This is the south elevation, which has got about 300 square foot of south-facing, or roughly south-facing glass. And there's no glass on the north, because the north side backs up against this natural rock cliff. There's construction shows the cliff. The client picked the site. It's sort of, the inside of the house is very much like a polar bear house at the zoo. It's just this, it's like building a hat over this rock formation that he liked. And we used these same laminated barn rafters, which are pretty cheap, and stock 2x4s, and built each section on top of the one before it and pushed it over the rock just like a giant slinky. And the decking, or the sheathing, is pre-painted homosote boards. A homosote's a building board that's made out of grinding up old newspapers. So once again, the interior is done, and all this framing and structure shows as soon as you put on the outside sheathing. and the insulation goes on the outside. This is a pretty inaccessible site, and we couldn't get a foam rig in there, so we used this blue closed-cell styrofoam, which is taped and masticed. So then you have a waterproof blue building with a lot of tape and mastic on it. So we put on one layer of ferro cement over chicken wire. Ferro cement as a covering is incredibly cheap, durable, and strong. You can smash this building with a sledgehammer, and it just bounces off. There shows one layer being cured while the cement is applied on the lower one. The interior is somewhat non-standard and client-specific. This guy wanted the people to be kind of ill at ease in his house because he felt it would give him sort of a psychological edge over them. So he didn't want any walls and only one door. So you get the bathroom there, which you get some visual privacy, but no acoustical or olfactory privacy. And the fireplace is just your most basic primitive hearth or caveman type of fireplace. Is just a pit in the center of the house, and a fan draws smoke up into that suspended hood. And the shower is plumbed right into the rock. It's sort of like a grotto, and once again, it's right out in the open, so you don't have to miss any dinner conversation while you're cleaning up. So the budget on this house is amazingly low. It's $15,000. That first house was $20,000. Those were the old days. So we had to leave a lot of it unfinished. It was sort of hippie modern look to the interior. But some parts are incredibly well finished. Like we had a kiln on the site, and we glazed all these bricks and made this fabulous floor for the kitchen. But then the counters and the floors are just rough plywood, and there's all this raw cement and stone lying around, and then you've got exposed insulation. But nowadays I see where this is kind of high art to finish, especially here in Santa Monica. I see to finish a building in this style. In those days it was just called running out of money. Here's some more. Those are the stairs on the left and the master bedroom on the right. Yeah, he saved a lot of money by acting as his own interior decorator. These are the plans. This is what you just saw, obviously drawn after the fact. If that makes any sense. These are just some glossies that we took for the media, expecting to become famous, and the only media that picked this up actually was Popular Science and the National Enquirer, which gave it the Weird Homes Award in its Elvis Presley issue. Well, moving right along, this is the first energy crisis of 1973. A plastic surgeon in Princeton, New Jersey, asked us to convert this 125-year-old stone smokehouse into a vacation house right in his backyard. He felt that in the future, gas would be so expensive that nobody would be able to go anywhere, and that he'd have it made if he had this whole scene going in his yard. And he may, in fact, eventually be right. The building was there because it was too sturdy to be knocked down by the developer. It was a smokehouse. It was 24 feet, I believe, tall inside. It was two stories anyway, and in order to accommodate the second floor, we had to take out the tie beams that hold the roof together. So to hold the roof together, we suspended the floor. You can see it in the section there, to give the roof a little bit of tension so it doesn't spread the walls. And since it was a plastic surgeon, we sort of freely employed a eye, ear, nose, and throat type of motif for the building. This is under construction. The framing shows it's like building a house with having the siding already on it. It shows a suspended bedroom and a tubular bridge access to it, and then there's a bathroom that's enclosed up there so that the plumbing can go out by gravity. This is finished version. That's a little nicer finished than the last one. Sheathed top and bottom with fir flooring. So you have this sort of neutral sheetrock box in the traditional shape of a house with this sort of alien handcrafted sculptural wood item suspended within it. This is some more details of the interior. Shows the stairs and a little kitchen with some recycled diner stools with new birch tops. There's a very romantic kind of organic woodwork, and to complement it, we have this red velvet tufted door, giving it kind of bordello appearance for the vacation house when he really enters from his regular house, with a little jalousie window in it for ventilation. This is the kind of detailing that you can get when the architect is also the builder. You get that little trim on the stairs when you don't do quite a good job on the sheetrock. There's usually leftover plywood scraps for a laminated handrail, and the stop on that door is just a little rubber ball with flock on it. Okay, traveling around building these projects, we got someone involved in the technology of mobility, and that's our field office. It's a 1956 Airstream trailer, and it's pulled with a four-wheel drive vehicle to get it back into the remote areas. On the right is in a retirement community in the Pine Barrens where we lived when we were building that snail house. There's the trailer in New Hampshire, and also the interior. The interior is sort of like a 60s time capsule. It's complete with super graphics and vintage 60s media. There's another early project for camping, built in an afternoon with $50 worth of materials, again 1972 prices. On the left shows the unit in transit, and on the right in being occupied. And basically what it is it's hinged. Those are plywood ribs, and they're on hinges, and they fold flat in the box, and just a regular black bungee cord holds tension on the structure. And you have this awning that you just clip on and flip the box up, tie it off, and you're in, which has got to be a lot faster than any tent I've tried to put up. Plus you're high and dry. And here it is in a trailer park in Memphis amongst the Winnebagos and other travelers. This is a demountable building. Built it as part of my thesis in graduate school. The idea was here that the whole thing fits on one pickup load, and you can put it up in an hour and take it apart and move it. And all the panels are friction fit with just aluminum channel columns, and the roof panels bolt together through little handholds in the roof. And this would be a little model that you build to show that it's larger scale migrant workers can use this kind of thing. The school really had no use for it, so they gave it to me after I graduated, and a lot of migrant workers use this thing on about 3 or 4 of our jobs till I finally sold it to a guy for a hunting cabin. That on the right is a job site in the Adirondacks, which was accessible only by water, and we were able to float these panels in by barge and put up this building in an afternoon and have shelter that evening. But now we're embarking on sort of a more mature phase of Jersey Devil work. Alternative energy, appropriate technology, whatever you call it, is pretty much the most radical thing to happen in architecture since I've been involved with it. By contrast, everything else just seems like new models from Detroit every year, sort of a stylistic battles. The idea that a building can produce all of its own energy and in fact grow most of its own food is obviously an incredibly political statement. Modern building has become more and more dependent on a central system of distributing everything that we need. It's like an umbilical cord, and it's become an incredible burden. Because obviously that's who we're beholden to. In earlier cultures, the Greeks and Romans, solar technology was known, and it was prevalent whenever there was an energy crisis in any culture, and then it was abandoned whenever energy became cheap and abundant. Well, right now we've got an energy crisis, and perhaps in the future, again, energy will be cheap and abundant, or perhaps this is the last solar age. But right now it seems to make sense, if you're doing a new building, to think about the energy that it uses to run it and the energy it takes to build it. Now, the high-style architects that are in most of the major media seem to see this as some kind of an infringement on their creative freedom. So the gap has been filled by these backyard inventors and engineers who know very little about making art out of a building. So you have these two poles. So it seems to me the challenge would be to make a building that is energy efficient and is also architecture or art. So these projects, which are not buildings, just show some real simple solar technology. That's Donna's chocolate chip cookies, the staff of life, cooked in a homemade solar oven. And on the right is a portable solar still. It's on a camping trip in Baja where it's distilling drinkable water out of ocean water, just using the sun. And we've used a lot of it on our projects. It's Doug Herr's homemade windmill. It's just a 4-foot sheet of sheet metal folded into a pinwheel shape. It uses turns a car generator which charges 12-volt batteries for his camp. And this is a log sauna wood fire that we built out of scrap cleared from the site on the New Hampshire job and a few lengths of secondhand stovepipe. So in 1975, after building a couple of eminently sensible passive solar type super insulated buildings, we bought the active solar hype, lock, stock, and barrel, and built this house for a couple that had recently returned from 7 years in Tanzania. They were homesick for something that reminded them of African huts. And the closest I could come up with were prefabricated wood grain silos, which were made in upstate New York by a company there, the Unadilla Silo Company. I ordered up 3 of them, actually 6, so that you could make a double wall building, and they come complete with the roofs. And we set them up, separated them by airlock entries, a big kind of timber truss that allowed for clerestory lighting, ventilation, and supported this homemade solar collector that we made. There's a drawing show that the clients wanted 3 specific living areas, and they wanted them thermally and acoustically separated. So this plan, this kind of multi-building plan, actually suited their lifestyle pretty well. That most eastern one, the work silo, which is a study and a shop, is excluded from the solar heating system, and in fact in wintertime it's just heated with a stove whenever it's needed. So the house again can shrink. There's some precedent for this type of organization in Midwestern architecture. Also, we were not the first people to use silos as either dwellings or for other uses. There's a restaurant in Nebraska on the right. House in Ohio on the left. This shows a construction shot, shows the foam insulation in the roof structure. We pulled the silos apart by 4 feet and ran this 4-foot by 90-foot by 2-story high slot down the center, which gives a place for circulation, place to run the stovepipes out, ventilation, light, etc. And also keeps the silos from being like real rigid circles. The oval is sort of a more or less of a final shape than a circle. That, on the final version on the left, shows the structure exposed in the final product. This is 1975. You couldn't buy a solar collector yet on the market, so we had to make one. And we use these recycled aluminum printer's plates. You can see it gives the guys something to read while they're on the job. As the rear absorber, yeah, these things are used once and then they're just winged. So you can get them fairly cheaply. And it's insulated on the back side, and then the front part is 6 layers of expanded metal lath covered by 2 layers of fiberglass. It's an air-type collector. We knew it wasn't going to be the last word, so we put a walkway in the front, which we then sheathed with metal roofing to be a reflector, and then left a lot of room in the back so that when photovoltaics or whatever's happening next comes along, it'll be a real easy retrofit. It's not even attached to the house, so it's not going to disturb anybody when it's changed around, too. It works okay. It supplies about 40% of the heat. The rest is all by wood stoves. There's a small electric heater in the bathroom. So also, again, the mechanical system is a pretty highly visual element on the interior. They've furnished it pretty much like a cabin, which is nice. These are the airlock entries. The thermal considerations were a lot less, so it could be a lot looser. They're skylit, and he's got a collection of African art, and he rotates the pieces in that little niche there in the entry. These are the airlock entries from the outside. That'd be the north side on the left. And it shows the summer ventilation system. The wind blows through those round openings. It creates kind of a Venturi effect. And if you open that circular window, that's an operable window, it exhausts all the high heated air out of the house. And since it's undercover, you can keep it open all summer. So which means it's important in the east when it's raining and muggy outside. There's a series of stairs, ramps, and decks which are a little more freeform in their design and more site-specific. It's meant to complement this real kind of rigid mechanical form of the building and tie it a little bit more specifically to its site. This would be the north elevations. In the wintertime, you put in these foil-faced foam panels for insulation. It gives it a kind of a Tudor effect, and it also reflects a little south light into the interior. In the spring, it's a little more open. The material for sheathing the back of that collector is a single sheet of this vinyl car roofing that they put on those Landau cars. There's another summer and winter picture. Shows a dramatic contrast. If you get a site with deciduous trees, in the summertime you're totally shaded. The collector's shaded, the house is shaded, it's nice and cool. In the wintertime, it's wide open. Okay, this is called the football house. Strangely enough, it's the first project we built here in California, and now it can be told that it was built for the building editor of Sunset Magazine. I like to say that his wife threatened to divorce him if he didn't stop watching football on the TV, so he built a special building that was only used on Monday nights and Sunday afternoons. But it's not true. The true story is that he was actually going to be fired from Sunset, so he sold this building and assumed a more acceptable regional lifestyle. It's not really true either. But he did sell the building and make a lot of money. It's not really a house. It's an addition to an existing house. And you can see on the drawings that it's separate from the building to save those 3 redwood trees. And it's also separate from the building because we wanted to build something in a little bit of different style than that kind of wood butcher Northern California style. He said it was okay to build anything we wanted out there as long as we used brown asphalt shingles on the roof, because that was on the roof of his regular house and that would somehow tie it all together. But the crew was really disappointed because they felt that the only appropriate roofing for this structure was AstroTurf, the football imagery. Well, it looked great on the plans and the model was okay, but building it was fairly hairy. On this, it's on a 45-degree slope, and it only touches ground in a couple places, sort of minimize slope damage. There's basically 2 trusses, which are the side walls, 12 feet apart, cantilevered from piers, which are sent way down into the slope, and the floor is suspended between them. And then the curved parts make them football or lenticular-shaped trusses, and the curved parts support the roof beams, and there's a box beam across the south. That'd be the south elevation on the right, which is a 12-foot sliding glass door for as much daytime solar gain as possible, and then there's it's a pointed skylight, which we found in some catalog, that is at the ridge, gives it proper slope at that point and lets in a little bit of extra light. This is the deck on the south, sun deck, and also reflects a little light into the building. These are some shots of the bridge that connects it to the regular house. The stairs and bridge are both real simple sandwiched 2x4 exposed stud construction, and the verticals of the trusses extend upward to support a bowed roof which is covered in ornite fiberglass, corrugated fiberglass. Another popular Santa Monica building material, I guess. And these are some finals which show the bridge converted into a sort of a linear greenhouse. Now we call this pre-earthquake architecture. This building is located a quarter of a mile from the San Andreas Fault, and so it's really apparent that it's not going to be with us forever. And in fact, maybe not all that much longer. So we wanted to build something that would be really graceful when it failed. And so it's either kind of gently rolling down the hill or maybe end over end towards some goalposts. And we dated the piers because we figured they'd last, and when the archaeologists piece together life in Northern California in the 70s, they'll have some clues. We liked California, though, and we stayed out here, and we came down to Los Angeles to see Disneyland and all the other sites. And we latched on as handymen at a boarding school in Los Olivos, which is in the mountains above Santa Barbara. Here we are in our uniforms, modeling 2 prototype bureaus that we designed and built, which are designed to withstand the rugged abuse of boarding school living. Well, they liked them, and they asked us to make a few more, so we took over the school shop and started to crank out these drawers and bureaus. The little shop they gave us wasn't adequate for the work we were doing, so pretty soon we moved outside. There you can see sort of bureaus flowing out of the shop. There's There's Pat taking the bureaus out in the field for sort of a group photo. This is at the same time as Christo's running fence in Northern California. And he said that was about bureaucracy. So I figured we did him, we did him one better. Okay, I'll away from the mass production for a minute into something that's maybe a little more custom. If you hang around California long enough, sooner or later you're going to get lucky. And we landed this big job. This is not the job. We landed a big job designing and building a house, the one that Fred visited, on 50 acres for a wealthy divorce lawyer in Northern California. Yeah, this is not the house or the divorce lawyer, but this is what partner Jim Adamson built for himself to live in during this project. And basically, it's an armature of rebar and chicken wire, and then he dipped burlap bags in kind of a wet cement slurry and applied them to the structure, much like paper mache, and it gave him a base coat on which he could trowel on a final coat. There's an inside on the right. His bedroom is this curved plywood item, and it's actually under the berm on the left. And on top of the berm, he grows a kind of a modest vegetable garden. So, and the window system is kind of unique as well. There are these vinyl booties that you tie on there during the rainy season and take off during the rest of the year. It's a perfect California solution. And he has gravity water, and he's got a wood stove in there, and kind of an ingenious arrangement where a coil goes through the flue, and he heats some hot water, and he can take a shower right in his entrance porch there in that little egg-shaped dome. So here we have maybe a prototype for the house of the future. It's smaller, more energy efficient, grows some of its own food, but probably not likely a prototype. More likely this will be what we get. We figured we had this big job, so we ought to have an office like all the guys do when they build office buildings downtown. So we phoned up the Action Mobile Office Rentals in Berkeley and asked them to deliver this baby. And they brought it out. He was a little surprised, but we paid the bill, so he left it there for a year and a half. And it had a kind of a timeless Bauhaus quality to it. But we couldn't wait to modify it. There's Jim starting the beginnings of a deck. There's the inside began as a real corporate and efficient, and soon degenerated into our standard scene. It's right across from the well, which was the only thing on site when we got there, and we put up a windmill to pump the water. It's just still used throughout the Midwest. You order them from Nebraska and you put them up if you can figure out the instructions. So it wasn't that easy. It pumps water into a redwood holding tank, and that black kind of Darth Vader item there is a solar shower. It's gravity fed and thermal siphon for the crew. And you can see in the background is the trailer, which has by now got a tool shed and a greenhouse on it, and owner's hot tub, which we ordered before we even broke ground on the site. Okay, this is the house that we built for him. The site is awesome, and you can see the ocean, and you can see all of San Francisco Bay. But there's nothing between you and the ocean, so the wind sometimes reaches over 100 miles an hour. So the strategy for the house was to somehow dig it into the hill, build the house, and then put the hill back. So it's cut into like a man-made south bowl, which hopefully deflects the wind over it and lets the sunlight into it. There are earth berms, and then there's grass goes up onto the roof, and that's partly to blend it in with the site and partly to keep it from blowing off there. It follows the contours of the hill, and in defining this curve, it wraps around a courtyard, which is then protected from the wind. There has to be some drawings of it. The plan shows it to be just a curved version of a California ranch house. It's got a two-car garage with a wine cellar off of it, family room and some kids' bedrooms separated from the parents' area by the public spaces, and a lot of outdoor space for native plants. In the section, you can see these lenticular trusses that give the roof its hill-like shape. South windows for direct gain of solar, which is stored in the floor, which is concrete with tile on it. and a little trom wall, which is 50% below grade and is totally convective. Cold air falls through slots at the floor level and then rises between the glass and the concrete wall, and it either goes in during the heating season through vents at the window seat, or it goes out as a cooling, kind of a cooling pump in the summertime through sliding windows. These are some construction shots, and here are the footings for that big trom wall. The steel and the forms for that trom wall, and that shows the vents. The part of the trom wall that's exposed in the living room is board formed, and there's the trom wall poured, and the slab utilities going in underneath the gravel. This is pouring the slab with an overhead pumper, 40 yards. We poured 175 yards of concrete on this job. We got fairly good at building these custom forms. Those are some of the forms, and these are some of the results of the pours. There's the site. After all this kind of concrete work, 175 yards of concrete, we built a curved 2-foot deep box beam around the south wall, and then the roof structure are these truss joists. They're factory-made tubular steel and wood trusses in that shape. It's a shape, just check it in the catalog and pay another 25 cents a lineal foot or something. And the whole roof went up in a day. It gives it this kind of airfoil appearance, and when it's sheathed, it has incredible load-bearing capacity as well. So there's a photo of the structure. The trusses sit on a box beam, which sits on 4x4s at 4-foot centers, which are taken down to the concrete wall. The glass for the wall is separate, almost like a curtain wall. It's on a wood framing system, which is a whole separate deal. We put the windows in first, fearful that a gust of wind would take the roof off if we put it on first. This is one of our last pours. It was an 18-foot arch over the garage door, which we poured in one lift, and it's got concrete catch basins cast in the forms which we use for windows. And you cast in these dovetail slots in the concrete, and then there's stone anchors that are a dovetail shape, and you can anchor stone to it. And all this stone was gathered from the building site. It's veneered onto the concrete. The stone wall continues along. It's part of it's just boulders that hold back dirt. In all, it's about 360 feet long, varying elevation, size rocks, and height. And where it meets the house, there's a layer of rigid insulation between, so you get this the ultimate thermal cross-section. You got thermal mass on both sides of insulation. The roof deck is pine, 2x6. The clean stuff is used over the living room and public area where it's exposed. The rest is old form boards. And there's a plywood diaphragm and rigid insulation. Standard hot mop roof, maybe 4 plies with an extra heavy top sheet and extra gravel and drain tiles actually integrated in the roof. And most of the roof water is taken down to this planter in the center of the courtyard, which is a 6-foot diameter manhole, and functions almost like a large flower pot that when it fills up with water, it drains. There's 4 inches of base rock, 4 inches of topsoil on the roof, and there's the first grass seed sprouting. Meanwhile, on the south elevation, we're finishing the trom wall. It's painted black, and you can see those little sliding windows, which are the vents for summer cooling. These are some rocks also from the site we use for landscaping. It's a big one. So the tractor was able to stack them for our retaining walls. Yeah, this shows one of them in a rented truck. If you're going to do this kind of work, you probably shouldn't use your own truck. That's a real rare photo, which I have yet to send to Vern, of an 8-ton boulder in a 3/4-ton dump truck. Yeah, if you look closely, you can see that only one side of the truck is lifting. The other side is just kind of spitting hydraulic fluid all over the driveway. This is finished detail of the stonework. You can see that, how the boulders kind of match up with the little ones. There's a courtyard showing some small vent windows on the north. Another finished views of the courtyard. Now it's complete with the hot tub, native plants, sun decks. There's a central planter is planted up with honeysuckle, which kind of cascades over the side of it. There's barbecue built in. Another detail that would be like that on the right would be an edge of a building. There's the only active solar in the building is to heat the water, and there's these two circular active hot water collectors, and they're integrated into the berm on the north side where they're a little protected from the wind. The only kind of outdoor space other than that little bowl on the south is this small deck that shoots out the back, and it's a kind of a concession to the clients so they could get out there and they could see San Francisco, but someday it's probably going to blow right off of there. So when the wind's not blowing, you can sit out there and enjoy the sunset, and pretty nice view. The interior is also fairly opulent in keeping with the lifestyle of the clients. You get quarry tile floors on the radius, stucco partitions, exposed trusses, stone wall for thermal mass. Everything is fairly heavy. A friend of ours, Tom Keller, built a kitchen, and Tom does the kind of work you really don't see that much of anymore. This is a laminated, steam-bent maple and oak countertop, and that at the right is a detail of one of the joints in this thing. Throw it together. This is the master bedroom area. It's got a hung ceiling, and the bottom chord of these lenticular trusses is sheathed with 1x2s, I guess it is, fir laminated into a giant curved ceiling. On the concrete wall, in the master bedroom, we cast the headboard right into the concrete and inserted these, or also cast in these catch basins which have recessed lighting, and that's the shower, which has also got the shampoo rack and all that stuff built into the concrete. We built all the doors. These are the two entry doors, both in redwood. These are some interior doors by Curtis Schreier of San Francisco. It's nice to be able to use manholes and silos and that kind of stuff where you don't expect to see, or you would expect to see something else. But when you come to an item like a door, which is a pretty standard item, it's nice to build it completely from scratch and rethink the whole deal. And what Curtis is doing here is incorporating storage into some of these doors by building these compound curved, almost like funhouse doors. Like that's a closet door on the left, and it's got tie racks and shoe slots and all that business in the back. This one is a door of the office. He's got a little office in there, and it's got a place for the bowling trophies and all that business on it there. Curtis made all the hardware. It's a photo of it on the right. This is some more of his hardware. That's on the right is a bathroom door, just a throw latch, and on the left is a door that features a wood spring to close it as a closure mechanism. Partner Jim Adamson did all the lighting design and installation. There's on the right is a kitchen light. It's got two work receptacles and a flexible light source. On the left is the control panel for the outdoor lights, and it's got a couple of night lights built into it. Most of the lights in the living room are standard terracotta flower pots. Give off an incredibly warm light. These are Almadon wine bottles, which have been cut with a bottle cutter and cast into these cement panels and used as a clear story on the north side of the house. This is a stovepipe elbow with an air diffuser, and there's a concrete catch basin, and inside is a Nerf ball, some gooseneck material, and a coffee canister. So there's detail of the trusses, and it shows those flower pot lights, and there's just a view from down below. These are some shots of the south side. You see, the north side is all kind of organic, natural materials, earth, rocks, and dirt, and then the south side, which faces nature, actually. The north side faces the Menlo Park and Palo Alto and all of San Francisco Bay. This side that faces nature is real kind of corporate, hard edge, high technology looking. There's a nighttime, and so if you remember the shot I showed at the beginning of the two inflatables, one at night and one during the day, it's like the fantasy of the 60s has become almost the reality of the 70s. You can live in a building that's almost like being outside, and if you keep the glazing orientations right, keep your overhangs okay, include enough thermal mass and insulation, then you've also got a building that isn't an energy hog. some more south. And then just a few more aerials too, showing it sort of nestling into its site. So now, flying away from this fantasy after a year and a half on the job of being able to order pretty much any kind of materials we wanted, we had to come back to reality. And reality in this case was a $60,000 tract house, which we just finished in Colorado City, Colorado. And the picture on the left, there may be 200 or 300 lots. Colorado City is a huge subdivision, and it's owned by these alleged silver manipulating Hunt brothers. And almost all the lots in that picture, a few hundred of them, are sold. And have all been sold for like 15 years. And these people are looking to retire to this fabulous community with all these jobs, schools, and golf courses, and all this kind of business. And really, like, nothing is happening. It's a veritable backwater. And there's lawsuits and all this going on. But our client saw this as a fairly good opportunity to have a lot of privacy on a quarter-acre lot. And we saw it as an incredible responsibility, being the first guys to build a house there in this subdivision, to setting the standards. Actually, we're not the first guys. If you can see in the background, there's another house there, in the left there. So now Colorado City is also located in what's known as Mute Alley, for short for mutilation. It's the basin of the South Platte River downstream from where our government assembles plutonium triggers for hydrogen bombs. And it's the geographical center of these bizarre, bloodless cattle mutilations. There's like 200 in 1975. And most people believe this, most people in the area believe this to be the work of extraterrestrials. So the belief in UFOs is really strong in this region. And so when I was drawing up the plans for the house, this was kind of foremost on my mind. And also the client is an avid pilot. And he wanted something cheap and somewhat expressing his interest in aviation. He built that car that's in the carport there. And he likes to work on automotive and airplane motors. So there's to be a little workshop for him to work on these things. And these would be the plans. The site plan shows exactly what we had to work with. The house barely fits on the site, and in fact has to be almost that shape because of the shape of the site. Fortunately, it slopes to the south, so we get a south orientation. We almost have a solar orientation diagram because we're real wide on the south and we come to almost nothing on the north. In fact, we've got this buffer zone. If you can see on the right, there's two zones. At the sort of crotch of this funnel is the workshop, which opens out onto the carport, and an entry where you change levels, which are heated only with surplus heat from the main space. They're insulated off from it, and there's double doors. So if he needs to, he can shrink this house down to about 1,000 square feet in the dead of winter. Basically, it's just one space. It's around the sunken living room in the center. There's some partitions, which aren't really partitions. They're 4 foot high, 1.5 foot wide steel water tanks. Those are the shaded jobs on the plan there. And so the whole thing is pretty much open. The water tanks divide the space and also serve to store the solar heat overnight. The bathroom is the only room that's enclosed, and there's a jacuzzi, which is right out in the open there. Gives it a little bit of humidity in this dry climate and a little thermal ballast. That N62FL is his pilot's call numbers. They're up on the roof so you can read them when you're flying over it. The sections show a little bit more airplane or aircraft hangar imagery. There's, again, those lenticular trusses, this time site-built over the shop. The section on the left shows a 12-foot high wall, which allows for clear stories. So you get a lot of sun coming in the south, and the ceiling drops off real fast to 8 foot. So it's a solar diagram. And this leaves us with a big attic up there. So when you have an attic, you can put in a lot of insulation. We blew in about 15 inches of rock wool, which covers all the framing members and everything, and makes the thing incredibly super insulated. Also, an attic gives you a layer of cool air when you have no shade trees on the site. Attic is kind of a corny idea, but they do make sense. This attic is power ventilated. It's got a mushroom fan, which is thermostatically controlled, which keeps it cool. The model shows the construction. In Colorado, you got to go 4 feet down for a frost line, so it makes sense to start the house 4 feet down, it seemed like to me. So we dug the hole, called up a foundation contractor, had him pour regular 8-foot walls as you would a basement, and then put the dirt from out of the hole against the wall, so we had like an 8-foot wall underground, and we were ready to start building the roof. We insulated around the walls. That's fairly key. It's that blue styrofoam insulation around the masonry. The framing is real lightweight. It's almost nothing bigger than a 2x6. It's built-up beams and site-built trusses. And then the building is sheathed entirely, roof and walls, with this corrugated asphalt siding, which is called angeline. It's a material used for barns and factories, and it's cheaper than plywood. We use silver on the roof, which would reflect heat, and we use brown on the walls, which would absorb heat when the sun was low. This shows some kind of attempt. Most of the house is underground, and it has the benefits of being underground, but most of the underground houses you see look like bunkers. And so there's some attempt here to break it loose from the ground. Part of it's sort of part hunkered in there and part flying out of it. And there's a lot of pointy corners on this one as a sort of a gesture towards the only vegetation which grows on that site, which is cactus. So it's kind of a spiky, mean-looking desert animal. This is the carport. And it's somewhat unfinished. So this house is partly a reaction to that obsessive finishing on that Northern California house. This is real informal. It's exposed, rough framing of the lenticular trusses, including the plywood roof deck, which is exposed, corrugated asphalt, masonite siding painted, and foam core steel doors with magnetic weather stripping. Pretty great item. Those are some more of Jim Adamson's incredible lighting fixtures. They're made with plastic pipe left over from the sewer line, and those lenses are from the only industry that did come to Colorado City, which is the Dore Lamp Company, which makes these beanies for the top of police cars. Supported the local industry a little bit in building the house. This is the south elevation, which is the sun-catching side. The clear stories are cowwall, which is fiberglass, prefabricated panels. There are 2 layers with an aluminum channel framing in between them. The lower windows are by Sunflake, who are some guys from Colorado who make a window which has an insulating panel that slides into a pocket in the wall. So when you frame it, you have to have this kind of hopscotch pattern of windows, but it's got an R of 16, which is incredible for movable insulation. On the right shows the insulating panels close, say, at dusk. Going the wrong way. Yeah. It's the first one I missed, though. This, again, on the south elevation shows an item performing more than one function. You get this thing over the patio door, which is a solar collector. It's thermosiphon type, doesn't use any pumps. It heats the domestic water for the house, which is stored in a insulated tank in the attic. It is a shader. It extends out to provide summertime shading for that patio door. And in doing so, it has a bottom surface, which is a reflector for wintertime sun, and also a place to stick in some recessed lighting for outdoors. The triangulation of that part serves to rigidify the balloon frame of that particular part of the building. It incorporates a vent window, which is operated by a pole, which is for nighttime summer cooling. And then you got this soffit that's over the top. Well, first of all, symbolically, it calls out entry and indicates where the door is and where you go into the building, too. It's like a porte cochere, I think it's called. And you have this soffit, which is hyperbolic. And these pictures are taken in December, so a lot of sun is being reflected off that white stuff and focused onto the collector and into the windows. But in the summertime, it overhangs enough so that whole top area would be in shade, except for a little bit of the collector that sticks out there. Here's some more just general photos with the shutters closed and showing that soffit. That circular window is corrugated fiberglass, and it fits right in the corrugations of the corrugated asphalt, so you can have a little translucent light wherever you want it. The inside is pretty informal, small, and cheap. It's all wide open around that living room, and you can see those red painted items are the steel water storage tanks. And then there's some regular 55-gallon drums, which are also full of water, which hold up the kitchen counter. The floor, you could see on that one, was we just poured color into the slab and then cut a 4-foot square grid into the concrete, sealed it, and left it as finished. It was an attempt made to finish as much of it as we were putting it up as possible because we just didn't have that much money. It's sheetrock, and this is sheetrock warped into a compound curve, which is useful on the ceiling because it diffuses a lot of that light all over the room that comes in through the clear stories. The fiberglass itself helps to diffuse it so there isn't any glare. On the right, it'd be the entry. There's those circular fiberglass windows, and then there's a Bruno. There's a mobile made out of toy airplanes from the thrift store. The neighbors around there call it the airplane house. Okay, we're almost done, Bruno. This is the entry. It shows an attempt to deal with the ever-present TV antenna by taking it off the house and making a whole separate item out of it on a vertical tower. This house needed something vertical anyway. And just some more glossies. This corrugated asphalt is fairly weatherproof under the ground, so the usual kind of fussy change in materials and detailing where the building meets the ground is avoided in this case by running it right into the ground. That's, if there were termites, I think they could come up right behind it, but there aren't any in this particular part, so it's real clean. This is as we're leaving in January. He hadn't turned on his backup heat yet. And in Colorado City, the temperatures, as soon as the sun goes down, the temperature drops 40 or 50 degrees. So it seems to be working. He's pretty happy with it. And it's still known as the airplane house. I'd like to say that we found out more about UFOs when we were there, but we didn't actually see any. But these photos, which came back from the lab, see, what happened was we were having lunch and the sky got really dark and this amazing beam of light came down. And my best worker was taken from the job, and that's ship on the left there. And like that was it to the end of the job. And just this week we were on the job up here at Silver Lake, and he wandered in after 2 months absence bringing the coffee. So, but we didn't actually see any UFOs. So in closing, I'd like to say that although we have been accorded some recognition and fame for our work, and have even been in the New York Times and made it to New York City, I'd like to think that we haven't lost a sense of humor that's essential to any kind of work that you choose for your life. Thank you. You think so? Fred's going to do it. Okay. Thank you. Okay, what's next? If there are any questions, I'll try and deal with them. If there aren't, that's okay too. Do it. Thane says?
Yeah, everybody who would like to can come down to Brian Murphy's studio at 220 Pier Avenue afterwards for
A few beers and
beers and whatever else you want to bring.
it's on the Jersey Devil. And partly on Brian Murphy. Help.